ACCA asks its members anywhere in the world to adhere to a single global code of ethical conduct.
I think it's important in terms of as the world goes forward that we have a common platform in terms of an ethics code around the world.
Hello, I'm Magali Laguerre-Wilkinson. Welcome to Ethics in Business in Their Own Words. ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, has teamed up with Carnegie Council and CFA Institute to produce this interview series launched in 2018 for Global Ethics Day. It features global business leaders exploring how businesses are preparing for an ethical future in the face of challenges presented by globalization, technology, and human psychology. Today we'll be featuring two business leaders. First, we'll be speaking with Helen Brand, OBE, Chief Executive of ACCA, and then we'll talk with Kevin Dancey, CEO of the International Federation of Accountants, or IFAC. ACCA is the leading global body for professional accountants. It believes that accountancy is vital for economies to grow and prosper and works all over the world to build the profession and make societies fairer and more transparent. Its 208,000 members are trained to think critically and strategically. They're leaders in the organizations they work in all over the world, helping them to grow and prosper in an ethical, responsible way. ACCA's reputation has made it the most sought-after qualification for aspiring professional accountants, with over 500,000 students currently studying an ACCA qualification in 179 countries around the world. And at the heart of that training lies ethics. Here's our talk with ACCA Chief Executive, Helen Brand. What role does ACCA play in the community?
ACCA is the global body for professional accountants, and we're there to provide the professional accountants and expertise that ensure sustainable development of economies and businesses where our members work.
What is the code of ethics that accountants are signed up to?
The International Federation of Accountants produces an international code of ethics, and that's the one that ACCA has adopted and many other professional accountancy organisations across the world. And that is essentially the standards of conduct by which all accountants must abide and by which they're regulated. And therefore, if a member of the public makes a complaint about any professional accountant who's a member of a body such as ACCA, it will be investigated, and if necessary, disciplinary action taken. The public doesn't always know that. It's our job to make it known, but that accountability loop is driven by the code of ethics.
So you're basically the internal affairs or the police of accountants, right? Are you an accountant's nightmare?
No, accountants love being ethical. That's the point. It's only ever a very small percentage that move beyond the code of ethics or transgress the code of ethics. And I think that's the point about trust. The public needs to trust that people will, first of all, abide by that code of ethics, and on the rare occasion when they don't, that they will be held to account.
What are some philanthropic efforts the ACCA is undertaking?
ACCA's public value remit really means we're driving at that societal change and sustainable economic growth through the accountancy profession. So I don't always like to narrow things down to specific initiatives that we're having, because the organisation as a whole and all of our 200,000 plus members and 500,000 students should be driving towards adding value to the businesses, economies, societies where they work. That having been said, it's been fantastic to be very heavily involved in developing the accountancy profession in countries such as Afghanistan, Rwanda, Myanmar, where you can see there's a real need in rebuilding those economies and societies for the professionalism and ethics that professional accountants can bring.
You mentioned some of these countries. What are the trends that you're seeing?
Like all businesses and all sectors, digitization or the increased use of technology in business is absolutely huge. So there's no aspect of work, be that your ethical conduct or the way you process, that isn't going to be impacted by that digital transformation that we're seeing. So that's a kind of given in everything we talk about now. But also increased governance and regulation. very much to the fore. So governments looking for better governance within businesses and organisations to be accountable to their stakeholders and to the wider public. And also, I think the environmental impacts, so how businesses are dealing with the environment and being held to account for that, also incredibly important. All of this, of course, backed up by ACCA's own research. We framed it Professional Accountants of the Future, and these trends came out very much to the fore.
How is ACCA managing its impact on the environment?
We can't manage what we don't measure. So this is where the accountancy profession really comes into its own in terms of helping businesses, organisations, governments to understand the real impact of their activity on the environment and therefore taking action on it. So we need common standards of measurements so we all understand the impacts that we're having. It's been great. We're going to be celebrating this year the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles's decade of accounting for sustainability, the integrated reporting movement led by the IIRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council. All of these movements are very much focused on getting the right measures to make sure we can manage our impact.
How does ACCA work to create diversity in the accounting industry?
First and foremost, to be diverse, you have to be inclusive. And that means creating the pathways to enter the profession in the first place. So since its very inception in 1904, ACCA has worked along values of diversity and inclusion, providing opportunity without artificial barriers. In other words, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter your wealth, you should have access to that fantastic profession that can transform your life and transform the life of your family and your community. So since 1904, we've been working in that way. More recently, in 2015, we created a product called ACCA X, which was an accessible education platform free of charge for people to try out accountancy learning and to understand if they wanted to go further and become a full professional, or just to have that basic financial understanding that makes you better able to function in your home, in your society, in your workplace. The other way is through role models. We have members from so many countries around the world, well over 100 countries around the world, from many, many different backgrounds who are proud of the progress they've made through the profession. And talking about those role models, putting them on a platform and making sure they can communicate with the next generation is incredibly powerful.
Do you feel there are still challenges around gender equality in this profession?
Unfortunately, there still are many challenges, in spite of the number of entrants to the profession being largely 50-50 in terms of gender. When you look at the number of CFOs who are female in the Fortune 500, when you look at the number of partners in the major firms around the world, the percentages simply don't reflect that balance that we'd like to see within the workplace. So ACCA puts a lot of effort into researching this, to assisting our women members to progress further and make sure they're getting the right support and training, but also through our research and insights. And most recently, we did a piece of research showing that there is a 7-year handicap for women reaching the same executive level as men. And there's been a myth grown up around this, that it's the failure of women to have the right confidence or to lean in their careers, to take the risk to reach that executive level. In fact, what we found was that women quite often are denied the same opportunities to take new assignments, to take those strategic roles, and to be sponsored by a mentor who will protect them from the politics in the workplace and allow them to progress. That's actually meaning it's a 7-year period that they're delayed reaching that executive level. So that's good in a way to discover that, because now we can take the practical steps that will allow women the same opportunities to progress as strategic leaders within the workplace.
And what are the practical steps?
Well, first of all, assigning those mentors and making sure that they're in place, making sure that when there are big opportunities, new projects, that there is an open and transparent way that people are appointed to lead those projects, and it's not simply a tap on the shoulder of the person you know best or whom is closest to you. It's that openness and transparency that will give women the equal opportunities to men in the workplace.
How is ACCA helping with the retraining of accountants to help them adapt to this technological age?
So ACCA has produced its 7 professional quotients for success. We've communicated that to all our members, and we've produced a diagnostic tool where they can assess their own gaps in knowledge, and then we direct them to learning and training and opportunities for enhancement to fill those gaps and ensure that they're equipped to be the professional accountants of the future. And that's at all stages of your career.
So last October, ACCA launched Ethics and Professional Skills module. What is this exactly?
So in 2007, ACCA produced its first ethics module. In 2017, we've revamped that in line with the entire qualification to become the Ethics and Professional Skills module, to put that ethical conduct within a broader professional framework and test comprehensively how somebody will react to challenging situations within the workplace. So this is an interactive module. It puts you in real life scenarios, and you apply your knowledge of the workplace to those scenarios to say how you would behave. And there is no right or wrong answer here. This is one of the very important things about ethics. It's not something that can be taught line by line. It's not something you're going to learn page by page, but you're going to have to apply your professional judgment to those circumstances and reach an ethical conclusion. So it's a fantastic tool. We've developed it for professional accountants, but actually business people from many sectors are delighted with this, and we're hoping to be sharing that content with them over the coming years.
How have you seen ethical conduct evolve since you joined ACCA 10 years ago?
Since I became Chief Executive of ACCA 10 years ago, the focus on ethics has become much more intense, I feel. And that's because of the public expectation of business and of the profession. It's a very dynamic world we live in. Certainties that people used to have might no longer be there, be that economically, politically. The dynamics even within the family are changing. So knowing where the profession sits and how that ethical conduct is going to play across all of that dynamic is so important. And certainly at ACCA, year by year, we're ratcheting up that focus, and also education and training for our members around ethical and professional conduct.
When you took the role as CEO, what was your biggest challenge?
When I became Chief Executive, my biggest challenge was to think, how are we going to stay relevant in this changing world, in a global changing world? So ACCA is a global player, it's a global organisation. We have so many interests and countries and members to deal with. So how do you stay relevant to those that you're serving? Ultimately, we're serving the public. It was a big challenge, but I think we've come a long way.
What is the greatest ethical challenge facing the ACCA and the accounting world in general?
I feel that the greatest challenge for the accountancy profession and ACCA is to maintain and establish, where it's needed, trust in the profession. We actually can't function as a profession without that trust. And yes, it's been under challenge from many directions, be that the economic changes we're seeing, having to behave ethically within the digital age that we're now in. It's a changing landscape, and yet we absolutely need to maintain that steadfast ethical core to the profession and trust from the public in order that the profession can function.
You talk about maintaining that steadfast ethical call. Is it a one-size-fits-all approach? Does it work differently in different countries? Can you sort of explain how ACCA might work that way?
ACCA asks its members anywhere in the world to adhere to a single global code of ethical conduct, and we feel that's incredibly important. So if you talk to an ACCA member in Afghanistan or in Beijing or here in London today, they will be pursuing the same ethical and professional conduct and, more importantly, be held to account for it. So being part of a professional body means you are held to account for your professional conduct. And I think that issue of public trust and confidence really relies on them knowing that that single standard is being applied.
And now we'll turn to our talk with Kevin Dancey, CEO of the International Federation of Accountants, or IFAC. IFAC is the global organization for the accountancy profession dedicated to serving the public interest by strengthening the profession and contributing to the development of strong international economies. IFAC is comprised of over 175 members and associates in more than 130 countries and jurisdictions, representing almost 3 million accountants in public practice, education, government service, industry, and commerce. What role does IFAC play in a community? In other words, in what way, if that's even plausible, would I recognize IFAC?
IFAC itself is a relatively small organization. We have about 80 employees. What's interesting is that of the 80 employees, they're from almost 30 different countries around the world, and they speak over 30 different languages. So you wouldn't see us so much on the front line. Who you would see on the front line, for example, in the US is the American Institute of CPAs, which is one of our member bodies. I'm from Canada, you would see CPA Canada. So the organizations you would see on the front line are the member bodies in the countries around the world.
How does IFAC and how does the accounting profession manage its impact on the environment?
Very interesting. Some people say the only ones who can save the world are accountants. The basis for that, now that's overstating the case, but what gets measured gets done. And accountants are really responsible for the language of business. How do companies, organizations get their story out? And a big emphasis nowadays is on sustainability reporting and what's going to happen down the road. And that's where accountants come to bear. Because if there's no language that allows companies to explain that in a useful way, an understandable way, a relevant way, and a reliable way, then it'll just be anecdotal. So that's the key way that accountants can play in that space.
We're talking about before just sort of how your members have their tentacles out in different ways in the community. Is IFAC invested in creating a diverse workforce?
Well, as I said, we have about 80 employees from over, just under 30 countries around the world. They speak over 30 different languages. This is the fourth time I've been a CEO, and this is by far the most diverse organization in terms of employees that I have seen. And in terms of what we do in terms of setting up committees and boards that support IFAC, obviously a key issue is, do we have the right geographic representation? Do we have the right gender representation, et cetera? So diversity is a key value that runs throughout IFAC.
So it's already part of the DNA of IFAC.
Absolutely. And it has to be, because as a global organization, you can't take a model that works in country X and just assume that that's going to work in every country around the world. You have to shape it so that it fits within the different cultures and countries around the world.
In that context, makes sense. Are accountants up to speed with technological change? I'm going to ask you a little bit about, what about artificial intelligence? Is that part of the evolution? Has it been welcomed?
Well, yes, it has been, and really it has to be, because you're not going to stop the technological change. I look at the change that I've seen in my career, and that's been huge. When I started, there was no internet, email, etc. There weren't even cell phones. There wasn't even voicemail. So I've seen a huge change throughout my career. And going forward, that change is going to be faster and more rapid. So we have to deal with it. And one of the things we're doing at IFAC to support a future-ready profession going forward is on the education front. Now, we can't come up with all the courses and advice, but we can leverage what's going on around the world to make sure that the various member bodies around the world know what's going on and can incorporate that into their education programs.
What is the greatest ethical challenge facing IFAC or the accounting field in general?
I think there's a couple. One, we support the International Ethics Board, and I think it's important in terms of, as the world goes forward, that we have a common platform in terms of an ethics code around the world. Like, you don't need ethics for country X that are different from ethics from country Y. So in terms of supporting that, to get a common platform around the world is a key initiative that IFAC is involved in, because that leads to harmonization in terms of ethics. Now, the key challenge for us probably right now is maintaining trust, because as you know, trust, takes a long time to build up and you can lose it in a heartbeat. And one of the things about the business we're in is we can be right 99.9% of the time, but the 0.1% we're wrong is what we get tired with. So constantly trying to restore trust and build up trust is a key challenge for us, and is a key area that we're working on all the time.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about the International Ethics Standards Board for accountants. A revised code of ethics has recently been implemented by the IESBA. What are the highlights of those changes, and how does IFAC support the standard setting for ethics?
Well, I'll deal with the last part first. In terms of supporting it, we hire the staff, we provide the facilities, we basically pay for it through funds that we get from our member bodies and global accounting firms. So we really provide the support for it. It is an independent board. We don't have any effect in terms of what the standards are, but we are the key support mechanism for it. It's made up of 18 individuals from around the world. Some practitioners, some non-practitioners, some public members, etc. And that board is responsible for basically amending and renewing the International Code of Ethics.
So amending, how often does that happen?
The code was just renewed in 2019 in terms of being refreshed, a little reorganization to make it easier to use. There are constantly going to be areas that need to be looked at. For example, non-audit services. When you do an audit, you need to be independent. You got to be careful you're not doing too much in terms of the non-audit side. What's the right balance there? Also in terms of the business model going forward, in terms of if the fees from a particular client are too much, is that going to affect your objectivity and independence because you're so reliant on that organization? So there are, as business models change and as the world gets more complex and as the way people do business changes, just with the impacts of technology and everything else, do we still have do the principles that apply in terms of the way they have in the past, are they still going to support the professional accountant going forward?
You talk a lot about in our conversation about trust. How is the accounting industry viewed by the general public, in your opinion, from your position? Is it challenging to gain trust? And if so, and if it's not really there, what are you doing to rebuild it, to gain it again?
Well, as I said earlier, we work in a profession where you can be right 99.9% of the time, and the 0.1% of the time you're wrong is what tars you. Having said that, surveys we have done, kind of comparing professional accountants against other professions or media or politicians or NGOs, show actually that professional accountants come out fairly well. We did a recent one on tax. We surveyed the general public in the G20, which is across 20 different jurisdictions around the world. And when you compared professional tax accountants to lawyers, to politicians, to media, to NGOs, we came out on top. Now, having said that, we were just under 60%, so there's still a lot of room to go. And I think it's, it just has to be a constant focus for us in terms of going forward. So in terms of things that we're looking at going forward, clearly it's supporting the ethics board. It's looking at other examples that we can, latch onto. We're looking at having some guidance in terms of professional conduct in relation to how you would operate a tax practice. What's the appropriate approach in terms of tax planning these days? Because there's a lot of stuff out there about tax evasion, tax avoidance, aggressive tax avoidance, etc. And you have to stay attuned to how the environment's changing, how boards of directors are changing in terms of how they assess that risk, to make sure that we as professional accountants still remain relevant to satisfy what their needs are. So,
there's always, at least speaking, in the United States, for the person who is, let's just say, not accountant literate.
Right.
That would be me, for instance. I think the lack of trust comes from a place where there is lack of comprehension, or people feel like they're trying to get caught in certain ways. Do you agree with that a little? Or?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like when I think of the concept of trust these days, it's not just in relation to trust in terms of accountants. It's a trust in terms of media. It's a trust in terms of politicians and governments. There's a lot of lack of trust around a whole bunch of areas right now. Now, our area of focus is professional accountants, and that's where we're focusing. But this concept of lack of trust is not unique to us. It is across the landscape.
Before an assignment, do you have to? Is it like sort of? Is it a ritual to go through what the code of ethics are in your mind? I mean, is this something that
Well, you have to make sure that you believe you are competent to do that. Like for example, prior to doing an assignment, are you competent to do the role? You have the ability to do that role. Are you going to carry it out with the right confidentiality, with the right due care, with the right objectivity, etc.? So these are all concepts that fit into the way a professional accountant approaches his role.
And is there sort of like is there a mantra that accountants have to follow? Is there some inner prayer that you have to say before you do something?
No, it's not like that. It's not like that, but it needs to become part of your DNA. The DNA of an accountant just has to have a strong core in terms of a strong ethical core to do the job the right way.